My name is Tommy Whitehead. I am the president and CEO of Tomco Solutions. I'm a licensed contractor here in the state of Florida, native Floridian. Family lives here in Brandon. Our employees and team live all over the Tampa Bay area. And I'd like to introduce Bradley Roach. Brad, would you care to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Bradley Roach. I'm a public adjuster with Region Adjusting. I represent homeowners throughout the claims process.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brad. And so today, what we want to do is we want to talk about disaster restoration in the process. And that's going to go from the losses that we've been seeing, the issues we've been seeing in the community right now. And it's going to be from construction perspective, and it's also going to be from an adjusting and claims perspective. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm a licensed contractor and I'm here to help answer building questions, whereas Brad is here to answer your adjusting questions. And that's very important. He is a licensed public adjuster. And so he's able to represent individuals with their claims and businesses and associations as well. He can do both commercial and residential. His function is to get the best value for your insurance claim. And we're going to go into that in just a little bit. My function as a licensed contractor here is to ensure that only licensed and insured vendors are working on your home, that they're using proper protocols to restore you back to normal. We have found in this process last season and this season, insurance companies taking excessive times to get to clients, providing lowball estimates that aren't anywhere within normal market rates for this community. We have found them being disrespectful, not talking or not responding to clients. And so therefore, we very much enjoy working with Brad and his firm because Brad and his firm try to make it easier for the adjuster. But most importantly, they're there working for the person that made the loss. They don't work for me. They don't work for the insurance company. They work for you. And so, Brad, in this atmosphere, people are coming back into their homes right now and they're starting to see their damage and they're panicked and they're wanting to get their stuff out. What's the first thing you should do when you arrive back to your home and unfortunately it's been destroyed?
Yeah, well, when you first show up, obviously make sure that it's safe. But when it is safe to enter, you do want to document the damages. I usually start when I'm documenting a loss by taking overview photos of the exterior. You do want to point out where on the exterior of the property the debris line is, especially in the scenario with a flood loss. And then when you move inside, you do want to make sure that you're clearly able to see where the debris line is, how high up it is, if it reached over the outlets. And then, of course, in the area of personal contents, you want to make sure that you're documenting all of the damages to your personal contents as well.
And so let's start right there with what a debris line is, just for the novice. If that is where the water has risen up on a level and you see a line, like somebody's drawn it with a marker, almost a perfectly straight line too, right?
Yeah, and that happens when floodwaters they recede. The debris that was at the very top of that floodwater will actually stick to your walls and your furniture pieces. You'll see a lot of contractors come out with like moisture meters. The flood adjusters, they are really looking for that debris line because that's going to tell them a lot of information specific to the flood loss.
And so we're going to see where what we've been seeing is you'll see a debris line outside and you're going to see a debris line inside, and those lines are not always going to match. So it's depending on how much water got into your home. We're seeing some homes that have gotten more water outside than inside because of the barriers that they had up, kind of prevented some of the water from getting inside. And so we have people here. You mentioned your contents. We know that the water's touched them. Um, Most of these contents, they can't be saved. They've been contaminated, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Now you can always consult with a professional to see what is salvageable and what isn't. But the rule of thumb I always go by is if it's porous and it was soaking up that dirty flood water, well, that probably carried sewage in it. It's salty. So if items are metal, it's going to degrade them over time, potentially cause them to rust. If it's like some type of fabric, well, that sewage, dirty water definitely got into the fabric of your item. So if it were my home, it wouldn't be something that I would try to salvage.
Okay. And so let's talk about contents briefly. Documenting. That's model numbers, that's serial numbers, that's multiple angles of the same piece of furniture or contents, right?
Yeah, and what your flood adjusters should be looking for as far as like personal contents go is they first are going to want to make sure that the item was actually in the home during the flood loss. There is usually not coverage for items that are left outside, even if it is on like a back patio, unless it's in an enclosed space. So you want to have one picture showing the item that's within the home, one picture showing either a model or a serial number, if that's applicable, a third picture that actually shows some type of physical change from floodwater. So that could be rust if the item's metal. It could be just dampness if it's like something like a couch. And then the fourth item is if you are getting rid of the item, make sure that you actually document that you've placed the item either at the curb or in a dumpster. And if you show those pictures to your flood adjuster, I've had great experience with them just pushing it right through because you've shown them everything that they're going to be looking for, and it's really difficult to dispute that.
Okay, so that's an excellent tip. Don't just take a picture of it in the house, take a picture of it in the dumpster at the curb, and that helps prove that you just didn't clean it off and keep it somewhere else.
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay, so now let's talk about part of the remediation process, Brad. So we have a lot of homeowners coming in right away, immediately ripping out drywall, carpet, flooring, because we all know here in Florida, if we allow moisture to happen with too much humidity or heat, that it is going to cause mold or other microbial growth. So we have people that are they're trying to protect their home. They're trying to do what's right. But there's a way to go about doing that if they want to do their own tear out. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What they can do and can't do, and what's going to hurt them and help them?
Yeah, now everything is going to be a little bit on a case by case basis, but the key word is always goes back to documentation. Most remediation companies are going to be starting off with, say you got a foot or two of water in your home, they're going to go up 4 feet, and then they're going to be cutting out your drywall 4 feet down. They're going to be tearing out any kind of insulation. And then they're going to be documenting that as well. Now, it is important too, if your flood adjuster has not yet had a chance to inspect your property, and I know now there's so much devastation across multiple states that they are taking a little bit longer than last year that when we experienced flooding. So, it's important to have your remediation contractor actually section off maybe a foot or two of drywall that still has that debris line. That way, when the adjuster shows up, he can still measure that debris line and there's no questions.
Okay, so if a homeowner decides just to rip out all their drywall all the way to the ceiling, that could harm them, even if the water came up to that level, if they don't have evidence or proof of how high it came.
Yeah, they are always going to be looking for proof or some kind of documentation because the insurance just industry as a whole is not built on the honor system.
Okay, so everybody, just as we said before, keeping a 2 foot to 4 foot section of drywall of the clearest line, that clearest flood line, can actually go a long way for helping with your claim and justifying it, which will allow you to start the remediation process by ripping things out, and try to keep the house a little dry, but still preserve some of your claim rights or at least evidence that there was a flood. So that the adjuster, the flood company doesn't come out and say, "Oh, we don't see a flood line inside. We don't think water got inside."
Yeah,
So
and
that's excellent.
yeah, and I think you raise kind of bring us to a good spot where we can talk about a lot of the remediation companies that are
Yeah.
working this
So
floodplain.
please tell us a little bit about remediation, because remediation is not just tearing out. There's a couple of steps in remediation, correct?
Absolutely. Now, the big thing with the national flood insurance policy that you're going to see most of the homes that are in repetitive flood zones or very high risk flood zones are going to be carrying. It may read on your declarations page as maybe progressive flood, for example, USAA flood. Well, all of these policies, they're going to say a part of the national flood insurance program. And whether your policy says USAA flood, for example, or progressive flood, for example, you actually may have very well the same policy as your neighbor. The only real difference is whether or not you carry building contents or building coverage and contents coverage, or maybe just building coverage. And what happens every single storm is this is a federal policy. So there are federal guidelines that dictate what the policy is going to pay for. So it's a lot different than a lot of these remediation companies expect, where they're used to working losses here in Florida, for example. So as a part of the national flood insurance policy, they've released, it's called the FEMA dry out memo, that if you show it to a remediation contractor who's never seen it before, it is very different than how they're used to working. And it's very important that when you are going to be hiring a remediation company that they understand really what's covered in your policy or not. That way they can communicate to you potential out-of-pocket expenses or really financially what may or may not be covered with what the work that they're doing.
And so that's a benefit if your team is able to get on site early. You can give your initial advice and suggestions that based on your policy, this should be covered. Now, you're not the final say. The desk adjuster, the carrier is the final say, but you're coming with all your backup policy, your experience in the field to say, hey, this is how we would argue it. We're confident this would be approved. And then you and your team before, you've also told us there are things we're not sure if they're going to be approved, and that you tell us to wait on. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. If there is some gray area, generally I am always going to advise that, especially if it's not something that's very black and white within the policy. But thankfully, with the National Flood Insurance Policy, with it being federal, it is very black and white with a lot of their procedure and a lot of the things that they are covering. So even though a lot of the remediation companies may not agree with the dry out memo that ultimately governs how their billing process works, um, it at least is giving clear cut guidance on, as the National Flood Insurance Policy, we will pay for this, we will pay for that, but we are never going to pay for this. And so again, that's why ultimately it is very important that you hire a contractor that is familiar with that dry out um, memo and really just the standards that exist within the National Flood Insurance Policy.
Okay, great. So we've talked about contents, we've talked about remediation. Um, Sometimes people can't even get a hold of their carrier right now to file a claim. So, what do you recommend as far as filing a claim? Should homeowners call their carrier immediately and file a claim? Is it best to call you first or call you simultaneously? What's the best options for the homeowners here so that they are dealing with somebody that's working for them?
Yeah, well, I will say you should always call your insurance carrier first. Now, I've had a lot of clients. They're calling in and they're either waiting on hold for a long time with their insurance company, or they're having or the ball's getting dropped over the phone. If it were my home and my policy, I would prefer to just do it online. Most of the flood carriers that manage the program, you can just go to their website if you have internet access and file a claim there directly, and you do get some type of confirmation back with a claim number that actually like gives you confidence that, hey, my claim has been received, it's going to be assigned to somebody. And this year they've been sending out emails that even say, hey, expect a call from us within 48 hours. If you don't, well, maybe you need to call us. And so they give a special number for that as well if it's been greater than 48 or 72 hours and you have not heard from your adjuster yet, just to make sure people aren't falling through the cracks.
Okay. How important is it to make sure you log every time you've called, every communication you've had? It's always easy to keep an email, but a phone call, we kind of get busy and forget. But how important is it to note who you've talked to note the confirmation numbers, to keep that information?
It is important to have that information, but really most importantly, it's just important to notify your insurance carrier immediately and make sure that you have confirmation that your claim has been filed and you are at least in line to get handled. You'd be surprised how many people I walk into their home and they're freaking out and they're so distraught that they're just like, well, I ask them, hey, have you opened a claim yet? And they go, wait, I have to tell them, as if almost their insurance carrier should just know that they're in a flood zone, and it doesn't work that way. So you do still have to open up a claim individually, even if all of your neighbors are affected and you think your insurance company should know. It is your duty to report the loss immediately.
Okay. So now at this point, a homeowner has come back home. They've seen the flood damage. They've tried to get their contents out. They've either started remediation themselves or they've hired a contractor or a remediation company to come and do tear out for them. They've called you or they have called their insurance company. Um, so the next steps at this point, they can't just start immediately repairing their home, assuming things are going to be covered, can they?
Now you do have a duty to allow your insurance company to inspect the damages. So once you've had an inspection, if you are in a financial situation to just finance the project and wait for reimbursement, well, ultimately that's a decision that is up to you. you're not breaking the rules by doing that as long as you've allowed them to inspect your property. But most importantly, for the average person, they're going to want to know, hey, well, how much money am I really getting for this build back? And so it is taking quite a bit of time to get these estimates back. In fact, I have not received one back from an adjuster yet. But what I try to do immediately when I'm brought into a claim, and Tommy, you can attest this for the few that we've worked this week together, where I try to prepare an estimate right away. I am very familiar with the flood policy standards and what they actually cover. So the great thing about the flood policy being so black and white is that if I come up with an estimate, well, I'm using the exact same software that your insurance company is using. So we at least have some kind of ballpark figure to go off of to where we're not just shooting in the dark. And I think that helps give people a little bit of security.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about when you're writing that estimate. Are you writing that estimate exactly as the software dictates? Are you looking for market pricing? Because right now, labor's in short demand before this. Now it's going to be excessively in short demand. Right now, supplies and materials, we're having a massive run on those. And it's a supply and demand economy. So what the cost of drywall was a week ago is not going to be what it was next week. What the cost of a drywaller a week ago is not going to be what it is next week. The insurance companies don't always take that into account, do they?
So they do and they don't. The software that predominantly most of the flood adjusters are going to be using, same as what I use, is a software called Xactimate. And the reason that all of us use this software is it starts off by just doing a sketch of the property and a little 3D rendering almost, to where we can start adding in predetermined construction activities and materials. And the reason why this software is so predominantly used by insurance adjusters is it pulls the prevailing market pricing by city, and it's updated every single month. Now, understand with if they've published a price list today, well, that's past prices. So what happens every single storm is that Xactimate pricing is a little bit behind. You have to allow it to catch up to where the market is heading. So thankfully, within the National Flood Insurance Policy, there is avenues that you can take for that through their. It's called a request for additional payment, or you'll commonly hear it called a RAP, so RAP, where, say, for example, our software says, $2 a square foot for drywall, but your actual costs are $4 a square foot for drywall because, hey, like you said, drywallers are in very high demand right now. Material is in short supply right now, so that always will drive the price up. But thankfully, the policy does allow for things like that under the right circumstances.
Okay. And so now we've covered kind of what the policy process looks like. Once you've written an estimate and an adjuster's been on site, then you two kind of reconcile your estimates at that point. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it ultimately depends on how that flood adjuster wants to work it. Sometimes he may just want to write it totally on his own. I always end up trying to have my estimate before that initial adjuster meeting if I can. That way, when we're first meeting, it can be productive. We can lock down our scope of work together. And the faster that we can do that, even if it's almost in an unofficial capacity, it allows me to send my scope of work to a contractor like you, Tommy, where you can now see, hey, this is generally what's covered underneath the policy. This is exactly what I need to start getting a bid on. And then you can start planning a project and project managing. That way, when the flood adjuster finally does release his estimate, we can either request additional payment immediately if needed, or you can just start the work if we have enough money.
Okay, so once the adjuster releases his estimate, that's not the final word. If your estimate, if the contractor's estimate is $150,000 to repair, the adjuster's only authorized $100,000, that's not the final word in the situation. You guys take over to start working with that. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Because people are afraid, okay, I got $100,000 and it's not enough to rebuild, but I have to take it and I can't make any changes. That's not the case, is it?
Yeah, that's not the case at all. Now, for major scope of work changes, sometimes there is a reason that may be missing if it's not covered underneath the policy. But if you're talking about just individual pricing, then absolutely, that's not the final say, because as I said, flood does have a request for additional payment process where under the right circumstances and with the correct documentation, you can go above their line item pricing. And the second half of that coin really has to lay in with right now it's a catastrophe situation. I know both you and I are operating on very little sleep right now, but so are a lot of these flood adjusters. And you'll see a lot of these guys with trainees as well. So, these are the people that are going to start adjusting these claims in a few weeks. And, everybody is human. I make mistakes. Other flood adjusters will make mistakes too. So the other half of that coin is just getting that second set of eyes, where if there really was something that was just totally missed altogether, well, you can address that too through the request for additional payment.
Okay. And then from a contractor's perspective, sometimes tear out's done. We think we've seen all the damage. And all of a sudden we start to power up circuits or plumbing starts to leak because of eroding connections. Other things happen. Something that wasn't inspected or wasn't known at the time when you've written a scope and the adjuster writes the scope. So there are mechanisms to try to address that as well. Unidentified damage caused by the storm that's not found out until further in the construction process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why you'll see almost never, essentially, I could pretty much say never will that first estimate be, and by accepting that first check from the National Flood Insurance Policy, anywhere are you saying, okay, this is fine, my hands are clean, I can't address any issues that I may have with that.
Okay. And so we've gotten through this process. The adjuster says, okay, your claim is worth $20,000. Maybe you agree with it, maybe you don't. But the next step is the carrier cuts a check. And that check typically comes to whom?
So that check is going to be issued to you first, but then it will also have additional payees listed on the check. So that'll include any other interest holders. So if you have a mortgage on your property, if you have a HELOC on your property, they are also going to be listed because they have an interest. You're securing your loan through your home. And so if there's been substantial damage to the home, well, your mortgage company wants to make sure that you repair it. So most mortgage companies have guidelines for how to deal with catastrophic situations. Consult your mortgage company specifically for their guidelines, but generally speaking, most are going to be releasing about $40,000 up front, and the dollar amount above that they will hold in trust until you either have a signed repair agreement with a contractor or you have met certain repair benchmarks to the property. And that's almost the process to secure that, hey, we're not just giving someone a check for $100,000 and then they're skipping town and going to Jamaica. They're actually going to repair the home that we have an interest in.
Okay. And then just for clarification, when you say check to you, you mean check to the homeowner and the mortgage company, correct?
Correct.
They don't come to the contractor.
They do not, and that's very important. So some people who've had insurance, I'm glad that you brought that up. A lot of people who've had insurance claims from private carriers or a homeowner's claim here in Florida, they may have heard of something called a direction of pay, where hey, you sign on with a mitigation company or mediation company, and the insurance company cuts the check directly to them. Well, in the National Flood Insurance Program, they do not recognize any direction of pay, whether it be with a public adjuster, whether it be with a mediation company. All of the checks are only going to be listened to you and any other interest holder that is on your declarations page. Regardless of whatever contract you've signed with anyone else, the flood program will, hypothetically just throw it in the trash. They do not care.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that clarification. And so now I want to kind of segue a little bit into the construction process. And in that process, it's a little different than a typical job. In a typical job without any kind of insurance damage, we're free to proceed at the same pace as the owner wants to proceed. Now, in this case, we don't just come in like we advise the homeowners, don't rip out everything right away without proper documentation, without leaving those flood lines. Contractors do the same thing. You want to make sure your contractor isn't just coming in and ripping out everything without regard to your claim. This is a complex process. I know everybody is wanting repairs immediately. Sometimes proceeding too fast with repairs can severely hurt your claim, correct, Brad? You got to do it in a process and in order to make sure the documentation and the process is respected.
Yeah, you can. I mean, as long as you're documenting things properly, the flooded policy can be very generous as far as like, hey, maybe it's even been a month or two has passed. As long as we have the right documentation and it's in the format that they want to see it, then usually you can address those things.
Okay. And so as a contractor, once we have gotten our preliminary insurance estimate where we know there's what's called an undisputed amount or undisputed scope, that usually gives us the confidence level to go ahead and proceed with the claim because funding is coming right behind it if it hasn't already come. So I want to talk a little bit about the reconstruction process. One of the things that our firm does is we're already filing rebuild permits right now. So as long as your house doesn't have any structural damage, we are actually taking care of filing permits within the first 7 days because the permit for all your rebuild activity, anytime you're removing a large section of drywall, redoing your kitchen, fixing this electrical systems, that requires permitted activity by licensed individuals, licensed contractors, licensed insurance adjusters, licensed HVAC individuals. That requires a permit. And so we file that permit and use those licensed professionals. Now, Brad, there could be circumstances where a carrier does not want to pay if somebody decides to use unlicensed individuals, correct?
I have not ran into that with the national flood insurance policy
Okay.
yet.
Okay. All right.
Just
But it's best interest to use your licensed
it really
professional.
is, yeah.
Yeah, we're held to a standard, and then we also have municipal inspections. So once we file the permit for rebuild, we're now at the mercy of the municipal jurisdiction for issuing permits. Last year, sometimes we got them as fast as 10 days. One of them was 30 and 40 days for similar repairs. Just depends on when you get it in. So as we're starting this reconstruction process, the insurance companies cut a check. You cut the homeowners cut that to their contractor to buy supplies, materials to get that back in. Does a homeowner have to put their house back exactly the way it was? So if they had carpet and they want to put LVP or they want to change the kitchen layout, do they have to go back exactly? Is that going to affect their claim at all?
No, it shouldn't generally. You are allowed to obviously change, and I tell people this too. If you tell Tommy to to put your home back exactly as it was without making any change whatsoever, you'd probably be the first person in America to have ever done so. Most of the time, while you're there, people are asking you to do other things. Generally speaking, that does not cause issues with the flood policy. Now, there could be issues, obviously, where if you are going for an upgrade, like there are things of that nature, well, if it does cost more, well, you can't request additional payment for an upgrade. You know, your insurance policy is going to cover things of like and kind of quality.
Okay. So if you had a Home Depot faucet before and you want to go to a Moen faucet, they'll pay for the Home Depot faucet, but you're free to pay your own money. And in my firm, we allow that. We allow a change order for the difference in price value if you want to go ahead and upgrade because it's cheaper to do it now than it is to later pull that faucet out and replace it on your own. And that doesn't affect your claim as long as you're making your material repairs, meaning you're putting flooring back down, you're putting cabinets back in, you're connecting plumbing fixtures.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. So as we're going along the construction process, our firm does allow you to do selections. So we can do like for like materials. You can change colors, you can change configurations as long as you meet your insurance budget. And if you want to go over, our firm does offer change order options, which you sign off on and select your material specifically. You get those selections. So one thing is we don't just come in and put in the lowest grade Home Depot cabinets if you had really nice cabinets before. We don't just put Formica countertops if you had granite countertops before. And we don't just put in Home Depot faucets if you had Moen faucets before. We ensure to match that quality or upgrade it if that is what you select. So as the construction process is proceeding, you've identified everything, you've got the claims. Can you talk to us a little bit more about some of those milestones before they start releasing payments for the remainder of the claim?
Yeah. That is going to totally vary based on your mortgage company. You know, very commonly I will see them just do a 33%, a 66%, and then a 100% inspection.
Okay.
Now, I'm not an attorney, but I've heard of some attorneys being able to send in letters and get all of the funds up front with a letter of intent to make the repairs. You obviously consult with a professional for that. Or I have heard of mortgage companies even adhering to a reasonable draw schedule that is laid out within the general contractor's contract and their signed repair agreement.
Okay, that's excellent. And as a contractor, we try to work on the insurance schedule so the homeowner doesn't have to be out of pocket. But it's an important process for the homeowner to be involved in as well. The contractor doesn't just take over exclusively. When you have a public adjuster, I can't talk to your insurance company. Only your adjuster can talk to your insurance company. Likewise, with mortgage, quite frequently, I, as a contractor, can't call your mortgage company and ask them to do inspections. So it really is still a team effort.
Yeah, it is. Now, I will say homeowners are always allowed to contact their insurance company directly.
Okay.
Always. And you are also allowed to call them too. I don't know why you would want to, Tommy,
Yeah.
ever. But you are always allowed to contact your insurance company directly.
Okay. Perfect. And so as we're starting to once we get initial payments, we get permit applications, we get those approved, we start the rebuild process. So I'm going to now talk a little bit more about the rebuild process and what it's done. If floods were below your electrical lines, meaning they were below your outlets and they didn't get in, that's actually a relatively easy putback compared to if it does infiltrate your electrical system. So one of the first things we do is if we know that it's infiltrated your outlets, your electrical system, we send an electrician out to evaluate that. And that's important because you need to let your insurance company know if there's additional damages. Your adjuster can assume that all the outlets need to be replaced. That's pretty common sense. What they can't know is whether or not you need a new electrical panel or you need new wiring because of the flood damage without additional professional opinions. Is that correct, Brad?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And so our first process, if water's infiltrated your electrical system, is we go ahead and get a licensed electrician out to make sure that there's no additional damage that needs to be mitigated in your electrical system. Once we know your electrical system's good to go and we have permits, we follow all inspection protocols for each municipality, which is a little different for each one. Some have insulation inspections, some don't. If there's significant electrical repairs, they have what's called a rough-in electrical inspection, and that's before we put up drywall. If there's significant damage where it's coming up all the way to your ceiling and all your ductwork had to come out, we have to do mechanical inspections. Luckily, we haven't seen too many of that, not for ductwork replacement so far yet. But we follow along the process. So step one is after it's cleaned out, we are going to go back and make sure your electrical system's good, plumbing's good. Step two, we start hanging drywall. Some municipalities require what's called a screw inspection, meaning just we hang it up on the wall and it's there, but they need to see the screws before we do what's called tape, mud, and texture, where we put the coating and finish on. Now, Brad, in the texture process, most of our flood cuts are 4 foot, and that's most clients. Some clients are higher, but most are 4 foot. So does the insurance company pay to texture the entire wall and paint the entire wall to try to make it match? Or do they only pay up into your flood cut? Can you give us a little clarification on that?
Yeah, yes and no. And so the flood policy is very clear in this, where this is a big dispute I see all the time with contractors because Florida, unless your policy says otherwise, it is a matching state. They owe to make it match unless there's some other kind of limitation. Now, the flood policy, being a federal policy, they don't care about Florida statutes. It's Uncle Sam. You're not going to tell them what to do. So they're going to give you a reasonable uniform appearance. And in the event of drywall, what that process looks like is they're going to do the flood cut. You'll put back the 4 feet of drywall. They'll pay to scrape 1 foot of texture above. You'll seal and paint 1 coat of that new section. And then you will texture with that additional foot to blend. And then you'll do 1 final finish coat with the paint over the entire wall to try to make it a reasonable uniform appearance. Now, I know your process of what you do might be a little bit different, but with at least what the policy covers, that's how it is with drywall. Now, and we actually do have a question from somebody in the audience, like, hey, what if we have plaster, not drywall? It's not that easy to patch. There is a very similar process where you put back with 5/8 drywall, and then you do 2 coats plaster over that. You scrape texture 1 foot above, and then you do a skim coat with an additional foot to blend, and then you repaint, obviously, the wall in a similar fashion of drywall. But according to the National Flood Insurance Policy, that should give you a reasonable uniform appearance. But I know your company, you maybe do a little bit differently.
Yeah, and so with our company, we know what we're paid to do, which we'll pay what's on the scope of work. However, we also know that there's a quality issue that we do not like to put out sub-quality work. So our firm, what we'll do with the drywall is we will, of course, replace the 4 foot drywall. But rather than scraping texture, we'll do a uniform texture coat from the base to the ceiling. So you have a brand new coat of texture that is consistent and flows consistently and is painted. So it looks a lot more like new drywall than it does patch drywall, because there are instances where your best patching agents, you can tell a complete difference from the top and bottom. And so while we're not paid for that extra 3 feet to take care of, we go ahead and take care of it anyways, because we want uniform consistency and we don't charge the homeowner for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another really good question as well, where he asked, "What is the definition of contents?" And he says, "Is it anything from the drywall in?" So that's a great question. I'm actually asked all the time. So as a part of your flood policy is two parts: the building coverage and then your personal contents coverage. So there are major appliances that are actually not considered personal contents. So those contents are fridges. Even if you have a wine fridge, that is technically a part of the building coverage. Garbage disposals are building, dishwashers, ranges, water heaters, those are all considered underneath the building coverage. Now, for a washer and dryer, that is kind of the big exception that I see some people look at me like, what? That doesn't make sense. But that is actually underneath the personal contents coverage. Now, for outside of that, a general rule of thumb to use for the other items would be if you were to flip your home upside down, well, most of the items that fall out are probably going to be personal content. It's like your couch, your recliners, your TV stands, things like that. Now, if you do have anything like permanently attached to your walls, so for example, a TV stand that is just sitting on the floor is personal contents. But a TV stand that's actually built in a part of your building that it would not fall out if you flipped it upside down would be considered building.
Okay, excellent. So we've identified contents, we've identified your appliances can follow under building materials. We've identified plaster versus drywall. So as we're moving forward in the construction process, by the time we've hit drywall and cabinets and we're starting to install cabinets, the insurance process is relatively done. At this point, it's mainly a relationship between the homeowner and the contractor. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's totally correct.
Got you. And so as a contractor at that point, we're taking it off of Brad's hands. Not that if we find something else last minute that he can't help, but typically by the point we've passed demo, passed what we call MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing inspections, we've generally identified all the damage that has been occurred so that Brad's team has the knowledge they need to file your claim appropriately or assist with your claim. The rebuild process is staged. We try to get drywall in. We try to make certain rooms of your house livable. You may not have a kitchen for a few months. You may just have a mop sink. We can install temporary mop sinks so that you're able to utilize your house. We've seen some clients pop up tables. So you have a table and a mop sink just so you can kind of semi-function in your house. We try to get bathrooms, or at least one bathroom completed early in the process so that you are able to function and live basic needs in your home. But after we go through the insurance process, we take it a time. We develop a schedule to build back your house the way it was, or with the upgrades or changes that you have in mind. So the biggest question I'm getting right now, how long before my house is back to normal? I need it back in a month or two. Yes, I understand the stress you're going through. Please keep in mind that this is a devastating storm that's affected multiple states. So Brad was telling me earlier that adjusters are flying in from out of state to handle this, but they have to be flown to those other states as well. So your adjuster may not even be able to get out there for a few weeks. We're not sure when they can get there. I've had clients say, hey, they'll be there in 72 hours, and 72 hours passes and nobody's even contacted them. I've heard this. So the reconstruction process is going to depend on many things. It's going to depend on the selections and the material availability. It's going to depend if the adjuster and the claims are going, because we can't really build back until we have proper documentations and you have an adjuster on site that looks at those. That's the safest way to do it. Then it's going to be crew labor and demand. So I like to tell somebody in the normal circumstances, if we were gutting and replacing your house, that would be 6 months. Right now, we're looking at 6 months or longer, depending on when the contracts are signed, when your insurance payments are received, whether advance funding is completed, and what's going on with the entire claim process. We have many external factors affecting contractors, like labor shortages, like strikes that are happening right now, which could actually slow down the supply of materials. We have other storms. Well, hurricane season is not over yet. It is 2 months until hurricane season's over. And we've had hurricanes past hurricane season in prior seasons. So we're not sure what else is going to affect us. So please give your contractor a little bit of leadway and room, realizing that as long as they're effectively communicating with you in a reasonable time, usually in 1 to 2 days to respond, that we are doing our best to get you back to normal as soon as possible. Keep in mind, I don't get my 100% payment up front. I get my payment in stages as work is completed. So it's in my best interest, it's in a contractor's best interest to get that home completed quickly so that we can go on to other construction projects. And so how long is it going to take? We can't tell you exactly. We shoot for 6 months or less. It could be longer than that. And we've had some clients, because of problems with insurance, not using the proper adjusters, it's taken 1 to 2 years to get back into their home. Those are on the extreme circumstances, but we want to be available to get you back as soon as possible. It's in our best interest and your best interest, but it does take time, and patience is going to be required because there's so many people out there right now that need help, and the construction trades are not available to help them. We're well outnumbered, so we're doing our best. I don't think I see many other questions here. Something about contract. So Tomco will sign contract with you. If you're signing contract with Region Adjusting, we sign a parallel or similar contract with you at the same time. That lets you get on the remediation or rip out schedule right away. We will not perform any work without signing a contract with you. Even if there's a placeholder dollar amount that's estimated, we'll put an estimate amount in there, and then after the remediation is completed, we'll revise it based on what the actual build back scope is. That keeps you in our system. That keeps you and the homeowner and I engaged. And then we have a very specific clause in our contract that says this is subject to final approval of insurance estimates. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to sign something on an initial estimate and then it go down and you're obligated for the difference. We don't do that.
Yeah.
I have a question here about deductibles. Who collects the deductible? What happens to that? Brad, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so your deductible and your policy is your responsibility as the homeowner. And same as if you were to go to the doctor, you pay your deductible to your contractor. You're going to pay that to the first contractor that acts on your claim. Most of the times in the situation, it's going to be your remediation company, your mitigation company, your demo crew, whatever it is, or your general contractor who's managing all of that.
Okay, excellent. So if somebody's collecting your deductible payment, you pay it once because that's your deductible, but that's your responsible. Keep your documentation for anything you pay because that's going to be used in your claim process, right? You want to prove that you did pay this because at the end of the insurance claim, they're not, if you have a $100,000 insurance claim and a $10,000 deductible, you're getting a $90,000 check at the end. You're not getting a $100,000 check, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so that deductible is out of pocket. And you will hear contractors saying, I'll absorb your deductible. Brad, can a contractor or anybody else absorb your deductible? What are the circumstances behind that?
There, if you are underneath your policy limits, then you cannot have your deductible absorbed. There are very niche circumstances where if you exceed the limit of any particular coverage, your deductible is paid through the loss per se. But if you're exceeding a policy limit, it's because you've incurred cost over that limit. So you're going to be still responsible for it at the end of the day. It just essentially means if you had $100,000 policy limit and $110,000 of damages with a $10,000 deductible, well, you're still going to get a $100,000 check because that's your limit, but you still have $110,000 of damages. So you've still paid that amount out of pocket.
Okay. So be careful of contractors with a marketing ploy that says we'll absorb your deductible because that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, and honestly, you kind of have to think about it this way too. If somebody's willing to do the job $10,000 cheaper, just immediately without even knowing how much insurance company's going to pay, I mean, what other corners are they going to be cutting?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Brad, I think we have taken enough of these homeowners' times. Stay safe, everybody. Brad, could you just tell us again for the record, tell us your name, tell us your email, tell us your phone number or best contact information. Maybe it's just email or website.
Yeah, my name is Bradley Roach. Again, I'm a public adjuster with Region Adjusting. My cell phone is 757-251-8317. And my email is broach@regionadjusting.com.
Thank you so much. My name again is Tommy Whitehead. I'm a licensed contractor with Tomco Solutions. Our office number is 813-922-2299. And the best way to get in contact with us or to submit new information for new repairs is at tomcosolutions.com. It itemizes everything for us, puts it in a system. And right now, I'm proud to say that within 2 days, we've been getting back to every phone call trying to assist. With any contractor you hire, please go to myfloridalicense.com and verify that they are a licensed contractor. State licensed contractors are required to register with the state. The DPPR, Department of Business and Professional Regulations, are the people that issue those licenses. So myfloridalicense.com is going to show you if you're an electrician, plumber, roofer, HVAC, or contractor are licensed. Anybody
Yes.
doing this kind of work needs to at least be a residential contractor. For larger projects, you may need to be a certified building contractor or a general contractor, depending on the licensure and state. Our firm holds both the residential and building circumstance or building license. And so for all of these types of disasters and repairs, we're typically covered for pretty much any type of structure, unless it's a large structural collapse, which is not, fortunately, we're not seeing that here in Florida so much. So make sure you're licensed, make sure you're taken care of, keep your receipts. And this is more of a medical thing than anything else, but you're in contact with really nasty materials, debris, waste. Make sure you're washing your hands, cleaning up, washing your clothes. So, oh, Brad, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, so a lot of people are confused and they will sometimes try to search for adjuster's license on the DBPR website.
Mhm.
Adjusters are not licensed through the DBPR. If you want to ever check a public adjuster's license or any other type of adjuster's license, you just go to licenseesearch.fldfs.com and you can type in their name.
Excellent, thank you. And the moral of this story is know who you're working with. Are they covered with insurance? Are they licensed? What other things that you might need from them? Make sure you know who you're working with. Be careful about estate contacts that are coming in. They're not all bad, but some of them aren't licensed or working under other licenses, and they disappear in a few months when the work's done, and you never hear from them again. We're a local firm. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This webinar has been recorded. We are going to share this webinar. If you need to contact us, we've given you our contact information. We will also post it in the comments when we upload this video. Have a great day, everybody.